Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you very cordially. We'd like to make sure that you hear us, you see us, and that the translator is able to translate this meeting smoothly for those of you who are listening to us in the English language. I'd like to welcome you very cordially to this fairly atypical conference because we're showing preliminary results of the company. This morning, we also published a current report, and you can see we'll show you the results of the company for the first quarter a little bit earlier on the 24th. And we're going to try to make sure that you have some information comfort, and we're going to do an additional conference to share the full results. We believe the principle is correct. Perhaps it's better to show even softer results and reduce uncertainty. So we want to walk through the preliminary results with you and talk about the impact exerted by COVID-19 on the group and take advantage of this opportunity. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the entire management team. The entire management team is present. I'm here in the company. The other colleagues are elsewhere. I'd also like to welcome the supervisory board chairman who's participating in today's conference, and he will certainly have the opportunity to do a recap of the overall presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, giving consideration to this very distinct time we have right now, linked to the extraordinary shareholder meeting that is planned, as well as the rights offering as a consequence, I would like to share with you an additional statement. What I would like to tell you is a certain disclaimer, and I'll refer to this in the presentation. I want to tell you that the sole purpose of this conference call is to present and discuss the impact of the COVID-19 on the CCC Group, as well as selected preliminary financial and operational results of CCC Group for the first quarter of 2020, in accordance with the legal restrictions on communicating information about the company due to the profile of this conference call, which remains open for all interested participants. We are not in a position to discuss any other topics, in particular any topics related to the matters set forth in the agenda of the forthcoming shareholder meeting. If you have any questions in that respect, please proceed in accordance with the procedure set forth in the relevant CCC materials publicly released in relation to the shareholder meeting. So what we'd like to do is share with you the broadest scope possible of information, but at the same time, we have to stick to the legal rigors and regulations imposed upon the company in the context of the current situation of the activities we have in our plans. So if we look at the presentation, we have three major parts. The first part is the impact of the epidemic on the group's business, then the preliminary estimates of the financial results for Q1, and then we'll do a recap on the opportunities the company will have in Q2 and later during the year. So the leitmotif of today's presentation is, of course, the impact of the epidemic on the group. It has a multifaceted impact. It's very profound. And to the extent possible, we've presented information suggesting that this impact will be big, though difficult to estimate. And so we would uphold that position. Based on the quarterly results, we can start to show this impact, and we can try to reduce some of the uncertainty that you have. And you can see the results are very strongly under the pressure of this epidemic. We see that the group's revenue is down 9% year on year. Our gross margin is down by 4 percentage points. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And if we look at the like-for-like in our brick and mortar stores, we can see that that's down by 32%. Like-for-like in our brick and mortar stores is down by 32%, while e-commerce has benefited from this situation and has grown even faster than our targets, our assumptions. So e-commerce has also become the key sales channel in March. And you can see on this slide, ladies and gentlemen, and on the left axis of this graph I'll discuss, you can see the number of stores in CCC, and on the right graph, you can see the percentage of online in revenue, or the traffic. And you can see that our stores are shut down since the 13th of March, and only 6 stores are still in operation, franchise operations in Latvia. We've seen traffic falling. Of course, we had anticipated that the traffic in our Go 2020 would be down by 4%, and that's what we'd been anticipating in our strategy. But as the various markets were closed and the information about the pandemic was distributed, then you could see that the number of stores was dwindling. Of course, the closure of the stores was the biggest impact. And you can see on this orange curve, the beneficiary of these changes was our e-commerce position. And so it did grow by some 35% at the beginning of the year, up to 99% of the overall mix. And you can say that we're basically operating as an e-commerce company. And of course, things changed over time. So we had 3 triple-digit growth in e-commerce sales, and then this was slowed down later. And so then this growth rate was double digits, below 20%. So we can say that the e-commerce activity growth rate depends on the promotions and the marketing communications that we direct to the market. And so we continue to count on a strong growth rate here, robust growth rate. How has the company approached this overall situation? And we have 3 dimensions: the operational and business, finance, and so we have 3 different timelines. So what's happened up until day 0 on the 13th of March, when the stores were closed, and then we'll have the short-term approach and then the long-term approach, what's going to happen in the long run. And so up until the 13th of March, we could be pleased with the fact that the stocks were in place on time, and so the merchandise was in the stores. And so the spring collection sales, even though the weather wasn't very strong, we saw that the sales were up year on year, much stronger than was the case in 2019. We've got very good positive reception of the product changes and the collections we've made. And so e-commerce was developing and is continuing to develop. All of the technological changes that we've made in the various new iterations have been operating. And so up until that time, we can say that we were right on target with our Go 22 path. So if we look at the business and operational side of things, we had to make some very rapid changes in terms of how we operate post 13 March. And so from one day to the next, the organization started to work remotely, utilizing all of the digital solutions that we had deployed in previous months and quarters and years. And as an organization, we are working efficiently without any adverse impact on us resulting from the fact that we're working remotely. So we've refocused our thinking in terms of our sales channels, and we're fully focused on these e-commerce channels. And we started to negotiate immediately with our trading partners, our counterparties, and stopping all of the expenditures and giving ourselves, as well as our business partners, some time and some opportunities to find their way in this new set of conditions. And so if we look at the financial side of thing, and so again, without any delay whatsoever, we announced a rights offering. And we started to dialogue. We engaged in dialogue with the financing banks as well as the bondholders. We also called a bondholder meeting. And then we've also proceeded to start the work on projects in terms of having a financial liquidity guarantee fund, and to ensure that in terms of having products inventory for fall and winter collection. And so we want to have this financing all the way through the middle of 2021 in order to ensure that we'll have time to get out of the current situation on a sound footing, but it's something that affects the company as well as the overall economy. And so the crisis that's been provoked or precipitated by COVID, there are 2 or 3 important issues that enable us to look positively at the long-term impact. We have very strong e-commerce segment, the strongest amongst our competitors. And so this e-commerce in this time of period, or this period of time, is something that we are growing strongly. We're making it much more efficient. We're streamlining it. And so we have this window of opportunity in order to polish it. We've got a product that's very well customized into the thresholds, and sometimes it goes back in time to greater economic rationality of our customers and getting out of crisis situations. And so in March, we've started to reduce our costs, fixed expenses. And the next thing comes from the fact that our market share, starting with the collection of it, should start. Well, other entities on the market are dealing with cases like ourselves, but they're much more fragmented, and their ability to deal with other entities, and so their ability to compete with us is much more difficult. And so in the long run, and this is key, we'll return to executing the Go22 strategy. We don't see any difficulties or any long-term impediments to achieving our goals. So as I've mentioned, the company has undertaken immediate crisis management efforts. We put together a crisis management team with an officer responsible for coordination of all things. The supervisory chairman is involved, and so we're looking at standards of hygiene, public aid, so on and so forth. All of these packages of measures are operating without difficulty, without impediments, and so the organization is 200% involved, and so we're utilizing all of the remote tools to work. And so very promptly, we made the decision to utilize 10,000 days of overdue recreational leave without knowing what's the crisis shield package by the government. And we've done all of these actions that needed to be taken in order to ensure that we had the proper procedures for operation. If we look at the supply chain, we've mentioned, so the SS20 collection is fully secured. And so 29% of our supply chain is the factories in China. And so their production capacities are enable us to fulfill our orders on a timely basis. And so there could be some smaller consumption in AW20, and so as some stores are closed down. And so then we've renegotiated forms of payments related to the AW20 season. And so the number of down payments and pushing things back in time. This is a temporary situation in which the company has found itself as a result of the pandemic and administrative decisions. And these are the steps that we've taken. A very important block of operational and business activities we've taken is to shift the company into commerce and digital communication, and we're streamlining all of our technological platforms that the company has. We're utilizing the time we have, and now we have a little more time in the technological portion of our business, and we're working at least 100% full steam ahead in order to maintain that. And so we continue to perform some 90% of our shipments within 24 hours, although there could be some delay later. What's very important, we have our logistics center for e-commerce has the ability to handle all of the work. And so we guarantee the health and safety of our employees. And so the employees that are in the warehouse, and so we have rotating shifts because some of the employees have been sent home under sort of a short downtime period. And so if there are going to be any type of events or quarantines, we would have employees at our beck and call that could come back to work. What's very important here is that we've trained the staff in the warehouse and the production staff in order to provide support. So Zielona Góra is not far away from Polkowice, and so here in CCC we can relocate employees, and we're able to make sure that this is secured. And so this is the only channel that's covering our revenues as an organization. And so we have a channel of sales in Romania that we started on the 18th of March. So this is done a little faster than we had planned. And so I think at this point in time, it's ahead of what's going on in Slovakia, which had been started or launched 3 months ago. We have Hungary and Austria set up in the middle of, we'll do that in the middle of April, a little bit faster than we had originally planned. And we're going to accelerate the deployment of our application for CCC in another 5 markets. And this is faster than we had planned. This will be done in May. And so we're refocusing on digital. We're spending a lot of effort on that. Thinking about the operation and business measures taken by the company and the e-commerce activities. As I've mentioned to you, we've decided to reduce our marketing expenditures. We're cutting them by a number in the teens of millions when we were closing stores, and we've refocused our attention to the digital channels, and we're looking at things that are more native to e-commerce, and we're looking at some of the well-known faces that are working with CCC. So Małgorzata Kożuchowska and Dorota Wellman, Marcin Prokop, Van Lagoria, they're supporting the organization in promoting our products, as well as the social campaigns that we're running. That's one thing. We're testing live streaming sales, a new sales channel for us. And we're doing a campaign that can educate people about all of the functionalities we have in our application. We're pleased with how this is developing. We have a micro-influencer group. So we have influencers. We're encouraging them to work with us, and this is something we've been working on the last few weeks. And so there's a lot of effort being taken here in the organization, and we're convinced that this will contribute to our sales through this channel. If we go on then to the financial area at this time, as I've mentioned to you, it was almost immediate. In the first week, we announced that we would call an extraordinary shareholder meeting, and we informed the market that we would do a rights offering. We stated the parameters of the operation. They're written on the slide here, and we have information about the major shareholder participating in this rights offering. And so this shareholder meeting is planned to take place on the 17th of April. So we also started talking with banks and financing institutions as soon as the stores were closed. And we would point out that these talks, bilateral as well as multilateral talks, are going with a lot of understanding of the situation in the economy as well as in the company. And there's a lot of understanding. And so we're talking about PKOSA, PKB City, mBank, Santander, Millennium, BNP Paribas. And I would also like to thank you here for the pace of the work you're doing, as well as the fact that our talks are purely based on the merits. I'm not sure if that's the case in every company. In any case, we would like to thank you for how these talks are being run. So we've informed you on the 31st of March about having signed some of those deals quite quickly, and we're all of the possible cases of any type of default, that something where a default on an agreement could be considered to have happened. And so we're doing the negotiations and making changes in terms of, the term sheet that was presented to the banks, also to take in mind the expectations of the banks. And so not very many things have matured, but we're trying to push things back by some 3 months. And so we'd like to push back the maturities of all of the short-term liabilities until June of 21. And so in the near future, we don't have too many of these lines maturing, or nearly none are maturing in the near future. But we want to stabilize the situation on the long term prior to the extraordinary shareholder meeting to take place in April. And we want to give all of the parties involved the confidence that the company is in a very good situation, in a stable situation. And so that after the stores are in this downtime, that we're going to be able to revisit a stable situation in the post-vacation period, both on business and sales. And so we have also some guarantees from BGK, the Polish National Bank, Economy Bank. And so we want to participate in this bridge financing. We understand it in such a way that it helps us move through to the other side of the river, to the other bank of the river. And so we're talking about making sure that we have the inventories in the stores as well as the proper merchandising and so on and so forth. And so this program is aligned to that. Then we also have the bondholder meeting that's been called, just like the shareholder meeting. And we have the agenda that's been announced. And we have resolutions that have been put forward, and we're going to discuss the content of those resolutions. And so this is planned on the 15th of April. And so as you can see, all of these 3 aspects of financing the company, these are things that we started to do promptly within a few tens of hours from the moment in time when the stores were closed. So we've addressed them. And so we're engaged in pragmatic discussions with all of the parties, and as a management team, we're positively poised to completing all of these talks. Certainly, as we look at the stance and the attitude taken by the other party participating in these talks. Each one of these talks, well, I would want to mention here that the Supervisory Board Chairman is participating in all of these talks, and he's the sponsor of all of the activities along with ourselves. And we're doing our utmost, he's doing his utmost to make sure that we're going to be able to take the company onto the other side, the other bank of the river.
Having in mind side of the river. So if we look at the strategic side, what's the impact on the market? What's going to happen after the pandemic? How could this scenario affect us later? So we want to utilize 100% of the opportunities. There's several groups in terms of a positive scenario. If we walk through this crisis scenario, what can we assume in terms of how the company will operate and how it will benefit from some of these changes? So what could be the possible impact on the market? So we assume that the value of the market in 2020 will fall, and then it will gradually rebuild starting in the fall and onwards in 2021. We're also looking at the flow of events. What happened with SARS or MERS, and what happened in China and elsewhere, Wuhan. And so these scenarios aren't entirely comparable. If you look at Poland and Europe, we're looking at this as a point of reference. And so this is also presented in the backup of the presentation. What we anticipate is that there'll be a growth in online penetration. Consumers will move towards downsizing of their expectations in terms of products as a result of their disposable income falling and the overall economic situation. Of course, there can be some disruptions in supply chains. You know that China stopped working. That doesn't mean that Italy, Bangladesh, India, others will also have some disruptions. And so diversification will be a key word here. And we'll we can think about concentration. 15% of this market, to some extent, is in hands of mom and pop operations, and so that means that the larger players will take up market share. That's what's happened in all of the other crises. What's the CCC prospect or perspective? So e-commerce will accelerate. This, we're one of the strongest players generally, and so if we look at this amongst our peer group and comparing ourselves here, we can see that we're very strong, especially in the framework of Go22. So then our product offering is a strong suit we have, and so price working miracles. This is the translation of CCC, and so this will give us a good opportunity. We believe that the competition will be weakened, and it will be much more difficult for them to handle the comprehensive supply chain and the multifaceted supply chain and situation we have generally. And so we as a companies, having in mind cost savings and acceleration of restructuring of our less profitable operations, and so we're going to have to do this now in the framework of weeks and not months or quarters. So we assume that the gap that we'll certainly see in 2020, you can see this post Q1, and this is something that April also portends, and we're going to have closed stores as well in April. So this is a result of the lower sales per square meter, so sales density. So we're working B2C. So we believe that based on what I've said previously, our position will strengthen, and 2021 we'll be able to rebuild our position, although we believe that our retail revenues will be lower. In 2020 will accelerate the closure of some stores. So the base for sales could be a little bit smaller in 2021, and this would be to the benefit of our profitability in 2021. So as I move on in the presentation, we're going to want to speak to you about the various line items in our P&L and some of the impact, and quantify the activities we're undertaking. And we'll start with revenue. And we have we have short-term and long-term, mid to long-term. So as we have stores closed, so 100% of our income is through e-commerce, as you can see. Once again, I'd like to mention that we have a very strong e-commerce presence. So we were generating 120 million in revenue a month last year. And so when we looked at COVID, we were thinking that this sales channel would grow by some 35% year on year. And so we assume that this channel is the beneficiary of the current situation. Coronavirus is stimulating this channel, and so we believe that growth rates could be even higher. If we look at retail sales, we're the prisoner of a current situation beyond our control. We don't have any impact whatsoever on the pace or timing of opening stores. So we assume that this will start to happen in the latter half of May. This is kind of a conservative approach, but we also assume that this is not something that has to happen. We do hear from various countries that a soft reopening of stores could take place, but we're relying on what we see, and we don't see too much yet. So in this base case scenario, you can see that we have a conservative plan concerning our budget here. And you can see that the rebuilding of sales will take place gradually, but we won't recover the level that we had originally planned in our sales budgets. So if we go on to the next slide, we've already undertaken many measures to precipitate or to ensure that starting in March, but certainly as of April, you'll see the impacts of many of the actions we've undertaken already in March. So the costs of stores in the short term, you'll see on the rents. So the costs are being extinguished because of these closures, either because of the regulations that are being undertaken in various legal orders, legal systems in the countries where we're present, or as a result of negotiations we've undertaken with the landlords. We respect our partners, but we have justified expectations. So in the mid to long term, we expect that we would have more flexible costs, having in mind the fact that we're not able to simulate revenues in the upcoming months, although we do assume that they will rebound. We'll also accelerate the closure of some locations, and we're going through the negotiations. If we look at salaries, so we're making sure that the FTEs are in line with sales. So short-term contracts, fixed-term contracts that are ending in March and April won't be extended. And so FTEs, and so we assume that salaries will fall by 10 to 15%, and we want to do it in such a way that it's done as painless as possible, and to create realistic opportunities to retain those jobs we can. We're utilizing public aid programs. We estimate that the aid will be around 25, 30 million zlotys, of which a small double-digit figure in Poland. We're one of the first companies that started already yesterday that submitted an application for financial support under this financial shield program. We were well prepared. We had agreed upon that with the employee organizations, trade unions, and organizations. And so yesterday evening, we submitted such an application. In terms of the other costs, they will reduce on their own. So transportation, marketing in stores, so we're not incurring those costs when stores are closed. So we believe that costs will fall by 50% versus the normalized historical level, about 12, 13 million. And so if we go to the headquarters costs, operating expenses, we assume that there will be reductions of salaries, also of FTEs. These programs we've undertaken will give us an impact of roughly 5 million per month. We're utilizing overdue vacation, recreational leave. Some things will have a long-term impact and will reduce the operational leverage of the company. Some of the other costs in the HQ, so logistics processes, marketing outside of the stores, maintenance of offices. So we believe that we'll save 10 million per month. That's 10% of the normalized historical level, roughly 90 million. So we also have deferred payments. And so we want to reduce the costs of sponsoring. And we'll notify you that in adequate fashion. So if we look at our maturity of obligations or liabilities, according to the current report we published, we are working on that reduction. And so we're working with financial institutions to ensure that things are settled up by the 30th of June 2021. So we're taking advantage of the aid programs that have been made available through various ministries. We've asked for the deferment of corporate income tax, personal income tax, so it's for a year. That's 62 million. And we've also asked for accelerated return of VAT, some 62 million. So it's 120 million altogether, which would have a positive impact on the cash balance of the company. So we plan to pay all of those liabilities. In terms of CapEx, we'll cut it even more. So we're minimizing it. We're completing the projects that are very advanced, or those that are enabling us to reduce costs, so sales space. And so we're looking at the e-commerce development expenses, because this segment of our operations is becoming more, is doing more for us, and we're limiting, of course, planned expansion, and that's quite obvious. And so as we come on to the conclusions, we're reducing operating expenses of the group in this period in which our stores are closed. So the cost base will be reduced in April to roughly 170 million zlotys. So a large portion of that, half, will be deferred in terms of the payment deadlines. We're working on getting long-term financing, minimizing our investment expenditures. I would like to remind you that the company has completed its higher expenditures in previous years, and so our Q1'20 strategy had called for a very low level of CapEx compared to revenue in previous years. Generally, we want to reduce this to the level of e-commerce. So even if stores are closed for a longer period of time, we want to be able to persist there. So e-commerce giving us revenues will have, expenditures reduced to that level. And so the overall objective is to balance those positions. So the midterm goal is to secure supplies, inventories. Even though we've got a very strong collection in terms of the products we have, this is a point in time for the company. We've been saying this is the time in which we really want to show something. So as I go on, if I look at the financial situation, as I've mentioned to you previously, the COVID-19 had a big impact. Revenue down by 9%, gross margin down by 4 percentage points. And so we have a lower gross margin in e-commerce. E-commerce is up, so our operating result is down by 100% nearly. And so lower gross margin in January. And so in January, we have a lot of big sales to get out of the winter period. So the margin was down 4 percentage points with higher like-for-like in February. We wanted to be fully in our mindset ready for spring, and that's what happened. So we had lower temperatures in February year on year. So a lot of the sales in February was lower, but we had much higher spring sales. So the gross margin in February is higher. So the main effect is that we didn't have the first sales of our spring collection in March. And that had an impact on the margin. So if you look at the mix of our revenue, this is because of brick and mortar sales not working and e-commerce working, and you can see this on the two graphs. So as I go on and look at the e-commerce growth rate, it's very satisfactory. So it's 39%, Eobuwie is up 32%. So we can see that we're moving up with other markets. So if DZ, which is selling twice as much as usual Genie Rossi is found a good position in this channel. So if you look at financial debt, as you've seen in the presentation of the prelims of the company, so we have roughly 260 million cash open lines. So if we look at the debt, long-term debt and short-term debt, you can see that there's a change in the mix. It's at the expense of long-term debt. So I wanted to mention here, there is a lot of misinterpretations of the short-term debt, and so we'll give some more information in the notes. So if we're saying in our annual report that we have short-term debt, which is maturing within 3 months, we're not showing the limits that are coming to an end within 3 months, but according to international financial reporting standards, all of the overdraft facilities, and we have a large number of overdraft limits. So without drilling into the details, so the company doesn't really have any short-term maturing lines, or if it does have any, they're very small, and so we're negotiating this with the banks. So some of you wasn't entirely correctly read from our financial statements. And so this is true in some of the articles. And so if we look at the summary of the overall position, ladies and gentlemen, we're close to half the period of the quarantine. We're probably at the beginning of cleaning up the field for the company and moving through this crisis with the management, the supervisory board, and the chairman. We all have a clear mindset to utilize all of the opportunities to the greatest extent possible and come out of this change period stronger. So crisis give you great opportunities. We're able to move forward more swiftly and with greater motivation with the staff. And so we're getting rid of unprofitable parts of the business. And so this will be supported by the figures. I've already talked about some of them today. We've got the suitable business model with the well-nurtured product at an attractive price. We've got a good business model because we're strong in e-commerce. We've completed the investment cycle. So even under the Q1'20 strategy, we've shown that we don't really need a lot of financing for CapEx, and so we're narrowing that. And so to make sure that we have good inventory flows, supplies, and this would enable us to safely move to the other bank of the river. And what I can say today is that we have a very pragmatic approach to how these problems are solved. And so after this period of economic turmoil, we'll return to the pursuit of our Q1'20 strategy and generating more cash, and we'll be even stronger. And to ensure that 2022 and 2021 would enable us to augment the objectives that we intended to achieve and what's the most important for us. And we'd like for you to understand this, that CCC has passed the exam as an organization that's agile. We've been able to adapt very quickly to the new conditions, and we've processed changes very quickly on a large area of activities. We've addressed things with financial institutions. We've started to work on the issue of rights, and we're submitting applications to utilize public aid, and we're reducing our liabilities. And so we're very pleased with how the organization is functioning, and we're moving consistently and steadfastly towards this financial stability. And so this is an opportunity for us to reduce our operating leverage, and whether this will be in the fall of this year or at the beginning of next year, we'll come back to a normalization of the business, come back to normal business, we're going to be much stronger. So in this phase of uncertainty, we're going to make sure that e-commerce will offset the necessary expenditures. The revenues will be offset by the costs, and this is going to be our approach to make sure that those two vectors are in line with one another. That's more or less it from my side. I'd ask the chairman of the supervisory board, Mr. Dariusz, to take the floor and say a few words from his side. I'd like to welcome everybody. So perhaps utilizing some simple words and sentences, what I feel and what has happened. In fact, as the CEO has said, we were very optimistically poised for this season, how things would be monetized. We were very well prepared in terms of our products, and we were exceptionally early prepared with very good products, even with prices that were higher. And that's why we were full of optimism for the original sales of the spring collection. But what's happened is without precedent. It's unprecedented. So this is something, the coronavirus affects all of us, probably sales above all in all industries, tourism, the hotel business. So basically a lot of stuff has happened. This is not the first crisis that we've gone through. I remember others and my staff remember what happened in 2003. We had a big crisis and we were able to leave that, go through that well and later as well. And we have a good direction because we have a clearly defined action plan and it's in line with the current situation. As you know, cash is king, and so we've made the decision to issue new shares, and I will take up, and my main goal is not to be diluted and deliver cash to the company, so at least 1/3 of this offering I intend to take. So in terms of the success of this issue, we're talking with the banks, and we'll have deferred terms, and this is something that's happening, then I'm certain that this issue will be closed, this rights offering will be closed. There's interest. As you know, we have a very low market cap. It's half of what Eobuwie is worth. It's selling shoes, it's developing. And then we also have Modivo, and we have a lot of successes there. So what's the most important thing for us? So life will not return to the way it was. So for some point in time, we won't see that much traffic. We won't be paying the same level of rents. We have to renegotiate rents. We won't have the same margins. We have the highest margins in the industry. And we wanted to raise the prices. So we wanted to do some attractive promotions once the market gets started again. This is going to be a market of sell-offs in the initial period. We have to be prepared for that. So if we look at rents, we're talking with most of the shopping centers. And we've put forth our tenants, our points of free, and have annexes. So we spend 720 million per year on rents. And so we'd like to have a lot of benefits. So in place, we had some problems with employees because the market was more favorable to the employee than to the employer. I think things will change now. And looking at the lost traffic that we had in the original part of the year, early part of the year. And so we'll have, big savings in the stores. I'm thinking about what's going to happen once the stores are reopened. So if somebody is bold enough to say that we're bankrupt, that's a person that's very much a mistake. we've got, products in our warehouses worth 2.5 billion, and so we owe banks 1.5 billion. So we've got 1.5 billion in capex, which we should be able to monetize. We have a modern logistics warehouse in Zielona, which would reduce our dispatching expenses by 16%. So if you look at CCC e-commerce or e-size me, we're collecting the sizes of clients' feet, and so these are things that enable us to sell better, and they're amortizing. So it's hard to say how long this crisis will persist, but since we're not going to be paying rents in the shopping galleries, this has already been regulated in the laws, and we'll have subsidized wage bill. So this is something that we're going to be able to withstand, because it's going to be the equivalent of roughly one annual salary for an employee. So this, we can say that we're an intermediary in sales between shopping centers and the producers. So about our distribution channels from the producers. They're producing for us 80% of their production line, or 100% is doing for us. So it's not the case that they can suddenly move to somebody else. And shopping centers need people like CCC, because it's a very good company and it has a good price to value ratio. So nobody wants to lose a tenant, and it really won't be possible to replace tenants. So every developer is going to want to take care of its tenants. So as we look at all of the sides of this equation, we have to have the status of a frozen company. So the banks say, okay, you have a year of break, and so you'll pay lower rents once things are started up again. And so we have productions going on in China, and we should get this coming into our warehouse without much disruptions. We'll have 5 billion in products in inventories, and then we'll sell 1 billion of it in e-commerce, and so we'll have this available in our stores. Once the stores are open, then we're going to be the first people to start selling these products, and so we have good margins on our products, and so we're going to be able to participate in price wars that could take place later, because we have to rebuild the production. This could take 6 to 9 months. So some players not be able to rebuild their production channels. So we don't want to waste all of the opportunities that we had to put in place. So we're reducing by 15 to 20% our fall collection, and the competition has to reduce it by 40 to 50%. So I think it's going to be a major advantage that we have when we'll have products to sell. So we're doing everything we can. So in principle, I think I've said everything. If there are any questions, I would ask you under Zoom, you can pose your questions through chat. So if you have questions, use the chat. And so Wojtek Latocha will read out those questions, and we'll try to give you the opportunity in this way to pose questions. So if you could write your questions through chat. Do we have any questions on the chat? Yes, we have several questions posed through the chat. So the first several questions are as follows. Mr. Radosław Woźnicki from TFI. The first question: what level of gross margin do you project for full year 2020? I think the chairman has partially responded to that question. It depends when stores are open and what sort of product, what sort of collections we'll have on the shelves, how the competition will behave. The most important thing for us today is that having in mind the channels we have and the work we've done on the product, we have a lot of potential for our gross margin, and this is something we intend to utilize. We assume that the gross margin will be lower than we had originally planned, but today it's very difficult to say where it ultimately will land. So we have question number 2. So as you change from first in, first out, what's the impact on the value of inventories? It's negligible. Otherwise, we would have to show you the effect. This was looked at with our statutory auditor. Why are we making the change? We would change. It's not really a change of the accounting systems. It's because of the systems we're doing. We changed the architecture, the IT architecture, and one of the key factors was RMS, which is Oracle, which uses AFCO. The legacy system used first in, first out, and so as a result, we had to make some changes in the methodology of capturing the value of inventories. So it depends on FX rates and things like that. So it could have been more or less important. But after the testing period, we saw that the change was negligible. So that was one issue. The second issue is that we're not utilizing the same architecture everywhere in all of the companies, because e-commerce companies has to have a slightly different approach. We have FIFO. So we looked at this with the statutory auditor, and we wanted to make sure this is done uniformly. So if this were to have any sort of material impact, then we would disclose this in the financial statements. Today, we could say that it didn't have any impact. Third question from Rosław Woźnicki. What scenario do you take into mind for the securing of 400-500 million from the rights issuing, and what sort of lockdown period are you looking at? Marcin, will you respond? I can say, and my boss will add some more. It's hard to posit scenarios. I don't remember the number of the slide we showed you, but we will have lower revenues than in the budget. So we don't have any revenue in brick and mortar retail in April, but in May it'll be down in May. So if you look at revenue by week, then you could make, of course, some assumptions. One other thing that I mentioned, for us, we need the funds to stock the stores in the fall and winter. So as we reduce fixed expenses, operating expenses to the bare minimum, that's what we have to do today. We might not be able to balance with the needs of e-commerce. So this is one of the things that we have in mind for the organization to be sort of frozen and to continue to operate as an e-commerce business. So I think I've responded to the question. So I'm not sure if you want to add something. Let me add, after summing up our situation, the situation doesn't appear to be so bad. So we're in a slightly different race from the competition. So who would have anticipated that this crisis would take place? So we've completed a large number of investments over the last couple of years. And so now we're trying to monetize our strategy. So we were going to have 1.2 billion in revenue in March. and April. So we'll have to pay half to the suppliers, and we'll have 200 million that we'll have to work on. So we need some 50 million for the fall down payments, and thanks to our multi-year suppliers being very understanding, so the transparent to all the containers that are coming in, we don't have to pay customs duties because we have our own customs duty warehouses. So we're talking about the state assistance for funding employee costs. So we're going to balance all of that, but we're preparing like a bear for the winter hibernation period. So we have a hibernation period, and we want to have deferred bank debt with a lot of product on the stocks. So once everything starts again, we should be the biggest beneficiary. And so our position should be above 40% market share, and then elsewhere in Europe, about 30%. So there's no room for joking here. And so we're basically using an axe to cut costs and not just using small scissors. All of those weak limbs that don't have any opportunity to survive in this crisis situation or to achieve super profitability, we have to cut them off. We're going to have to utilize various standards, force majeure, and we're getting rid of everything that's uncomfortable for us. As you saw in the presentation, we're focusing on the Central Eastern European market in the several countries where we're the leader, and we want to build and strengthen our leadership position because we have a very good product. You have to know that people are going to stop buying shoes branded for 350. They're going to come in and look at our Jennifer shoes for 120 zlotys with 30% discount of so 90 zlotys, and we're just still going to have a 50% margin with the current valuations. So we're going to come back to the CCC where the prices work miracles, and this is how, in fact, we're going to follow this. Something that's very important. We've got the biggest coverage of stores. We've got the best price awareness, biggest loyalty club, more than 10 million customers. We've got the biggest e-commerce and monetization of new logistics investments, email review, and so on and so forth. So the time is for us. So this is even if it lasts a year. So we have additional scenarios. Today, in response to the question, would you like to take your shoes? We haven't eaten this money. We haven't burned the money. We've got all of this money in shoes, and now we're all going to have to wait together in factories and suppliers because without us, those entities don't exist, and I think everybody understands that. And people will buy shoes. They're going to have to buy shoes, especially since maybe they'll buy shoes differently. Maybe they'll buy more through the web. Maybe they're going to buy shoes less expensively, but they'll continue buying shoes, and that's certain. Thank you. Let me add from my side, in terms of what the chairman said. If we look at the figures and do a scenario analysis, assuming that we stabilize the financing with the banks and we get the 250 million from BGK, and we've got good, rational, and partnership relations with shopping galleries, even if until the end of 2020. So even if our revenue is half of the level that we planned, we would feel comfortable with the rights offering along with the BGK loan without having to think about any other rights offerings or looking at Buvia. So we're ready and poised for this type of a scenario that's just that drastic. And so we'll adapt to the conditions in place. We have very specific packages of actions And so our goal is to look at what's going to happen in the future. So we plan to do that. So come to the Central Post scheme from Heitonbeck. What about your budgetary assumptions for the rest of the months in 2020? Are these assumptions overly optimistic? Even if shopping galleries are opened up in mid-May, some consumers will be conservative about going to shopping centers. Then you have price wars in order to sell stocks. Your fall winter collection is going to be smaller by 10%, and you think that your sales will only be down by 10%. So in a recession environment, in a price war environment, this is too optimistic. We assume that we're going to close some of the stores in some of the markets. This is something that you've not looked at. Today, this is a matter of reading from tea leaves. We don't know what we're going to sell. We know that we're the best. We would be the best poised after this rights offering. So this new rights offering and the new loan from BGK would improve our debt ratios. This debt was for investments, and so we're very well poised on an investment basis, and we have the support of the shopping centers, the support of the suppliers, and we're not incurring such big costs in the closure period. Plus, we're getting rid of everything we don't need in the company. And so this crisis has sped up some of our thinking and thoughts about various subjects, and so there's no more room for mercy. So let's say that we want all the stores stay closed till the end of the year. Let's assume for that scenario that no stores open until the end of the year. So we have spring and summer in our stores, and we have fall and winter in the warehouses. So we don't have apples and oranges. We're able to withstand a year. So we've had reduced our inventory levels for the first time. We are capable of managing our inventories and products. So even if stores aren't opened, and if we don't open stores even in August or September, we're going to have products worth roughly 5 billion at the purchase prices. And so this, and then we will be waiting like a bear, and then we can turn off the electricity, no costs. We'll go to sleep, hibernate like a bear, and wait. And we're going to sleep in this period of hibernation, and then once the pandemic comes to an end, then we'll wake up and we're ready, and we'll be poised to do that after this rights offering is completed. Can you imagine such a situation transpiring? We're taking into consideration every single scenario. If I didn't believe in the company, I wouldn't put the money into the company. The price of the shares will depend on the market. eobuwie is a healthy company. We have, a lot of isolation amongst the employees. Their shifts aren't interacting with one another. People have big distances. So we're very well prepared in terms of public health, employee health and safety. And so this is all done in the new, warehouse. And so that cost more than 250 million. So our logistics are down 16%. We don't have 17 different warehouses. We're doing things faster. We're doing turnaround on a timely basis. And so our logistics costs are much smaller than elsewhere. So ladies and gentlemen, CCC will not bear the cross for the whole pandemic. We're looking at a scenario that closes us for several months, and that's what we're prepared to do after the rights offering. That's 100%. We've got inventories. Our stores are ready. We've got employees by the phone. and then we'll go out and start selling. And we've got logistics channels that aren't severed. If we're not going to be able to do any sales spring, winter, or fall, then we won't buy any products for next seasons. So we have everything in our warehouses, but we have to be able to pay off our loans once we come down with our inventories. So I think you have to be aware that we have the base scenario, where we've done a number of stress tests for the organization, depending on a variety of circumstances. We don't believe they'll happen, but we know how to walk through them. And let's go on to the next questions. Another question from Konrad Książkowski. If you look at CE markets, what's the rate of growth? It was plus 20 some odd percent as opposed to 30%. Why is that rate of growth smaller? What's the specific reason for the rate of growth there being smaller in CE? So to respond quickly. E-commerce is up 39%, Ebuvi is 32%, because we also have CCC, DZ, and Gina Rossi. So today, in total, along with the application, we have some 50 channels. We have a round number. So it's a very e-commerce company. So to respond straight out to your question, if you look at Czech Republic, we have more competition, but the numbers are comparable. So we're better than the competition today. Next question is to the chairman. What's going to happen with the sponsoring of CC's team and leave also in the long term? I'm not only thinking about this season, but subsequent seasons. So yes, so the cyclers aren't cycling. They've received the first quarterly installments. So now the question is, how the International Cycling Organization is going to treat that. If they're going to freeze this and have some minimum fees. We have a contract that is binding upon us this year and next year. So we have to extract from that. We don't have 265 races. We don't have Giro, Italia. They said something ridiculous that the French will take place. They've gotten rid of a number of the Olympics and other things. There's no sense to invest in sponsoring if we don't have any benefits. There was an idea that the product would be called CC's Brandy. And there would be some additional marketing efforts with shelves. So we would be able to sell 5 million pairs of shoes. So we have to extinguish that and close it. Of course, the biggest cost is World Tour. We have some schools. These are much smaller costs. So the World Tour group, well, the marketing impact. We're supposed to be in TV for some 90 some odd hours. So it's like the whole world of sports. Juventus is not receiving payments. They all want to declare. So it's unacceptable that a nurse doesn't even get overtime pay, and a football player is supposed to get paid. So mentally and financially, everything is being readjusted. There's a reset. So not everybody's woken up from this dream that it's wonderful. So when I wake up in the morning and I look outside, it's a beautiful day. I think that there's going to be a lot of sales. So I'm not going to go for vacation this year. We have to understand, all of us, that everything's changed. And we have to shake this off. I'm proud of my team because we're reacting very quickly. We're working a lot and we're discussing scenarios. So things are okay. We can enter this period of hibernation like a bear, having ensured that all the fronts are handled. The units where we're selling and staff, we want to be able to retain the bulk of the the personnel. Of course, there is a downside. We have had to lay off 220 people because their contracts were coming to an end. We don't want to be abandoned to act like a crazy person. Reductions are always nice, but you have to do this reasonably. I understand that this is painful to all of the cyclists. So at this point in time, the marketing assumptions for sports marketing just aren't borne out anymore. So as we look at the acceleration of e-commerce, is it worthwhile to open any brick and mortar stores? I'm responsible for this expansion in the company. So we've already said, so the pace is much smaller. So it's not just e-commerce. We see that half of the people come to stores buy additional shoes. So it's very important is rents. So basically, the level of rents have to be linked to revenue. It's going to be, we're talking about markets. We can close markets, but Austria, Switzerland, and so on and so forth. In terms of markets where we're the leader, we shouldn't close stores if we've got good relationship between a ratio of rents to revenue. So we have to really think about this strongly. I tried to close more stores than wanted to, and then stores started to fly. So we're kind of a store of first need because we've got children store, shoes, slippers. We've got a broad assortment, product range. We're a general footwear store for the whole family. So in crisis times, we're going to have a bigger advantage. Some of the boutiques will disappear because you can buy these products in the internet, but in our product, you need to have coverage. We're not Pepco. We're a network like that. We have attractive prices with specialist shoes. Everything's under control here. So our contracts aren't longer than 3 years. So if a store doesn't earn money, then we won't do anything. We've got limited expansion. Perhaps we'll push back some of the openings. We'll negotiate better conditions before opening a store bigger, fit out additional money. Perhaps better trading terms. But all these things are things that are happening. From morning to night, we're thinking about how to strike an arrangement here. We have a large number of questions. If you look at the prelims, this is the first time in 3 years. The number of square meters is smaller than in the previous quarter. When do you anticipate that your loans will be deferred to June 2021? The timeline we have is short with the banks to strike an agreement. Both sides are working very strongly. So we're thinking this will happen in the near future. A question from the English language chat. what is the level of reduced costs the company is incurring during the quarantine period when stores are closed? I think we gave that figure, but let me look at my notes. As we mentioned, the costs have been reduced to roughly 180 million zlotys, more or less. The bulk of the costs is spread over time, and so the expenditures we have are materially lower or are subsidized. This was from East Capital, and we also have one more question. For how many months the available financing, having in mind your restructuring plan, plus the will to continue the operations, what will happen if the quarantine is extended to June or July? So I think the chairman and I've said, and Mr. Półtorak gave response, what actions? There are no actions. If the company is closed, there are no actions. We don't pay rents. We reduce salaries. The only cost is to bring in the autumn shoes. So everybody else is at home. So let's think that the company is in hibernation. It's frozen. We've got a product. We're not incurring costs because we're not, if you don't, a sales company, if you don't have to pay rents, in some countries, there's much more assistance for staff. So every government treats this differently. Nobody wants to destroy the golden hen. The government, the banks, the suppliers, shopping centers don't want to ruin this. Basically, we're an intermediary here. So we're an intermediary between production and sales. We're all in the same situation. It's not the case that we've ruined something or that somebody's against us. If we complete the rights offering, we're going to be one of the companies with the best financial position because our monthly costs will be it's very minute, very small. So we can say what's going to happen in 1 or 1.5 or 3 months or 6 months. We're ready to go to sleep. This is the most important thing to do. What we've done for the last 20 years, we don't want everything to go pear-shaped. This was the time when we're supposed to monetize, and I don't really want to say any words about what's actually happened right now. The number of questions is gradually increasing. Well, everybody has to understand how we're going to operate. A question: is it possible that PFR, so this Polish development fund for it to participate in this rights offerings? We don't know the legal regulations. And as we've mentioned at the beginning of the conference, we're not responding to any questions about the rights offering. All of the information is set forth in the current report about calling that extraordinary shareholder meeting. The next question is from Michal. What's the plan for the fall collection for 2020? So the second issue, well, as the chairman said, we don't have pears and apples in our stores. We've got full commercial value products. And so we assume that roughly 1 billion. It depends when the stores are open. If we can start selling summer, we'll sell them summer. The spring shoes can be sold in July, August, September, when people go back to school. So it really depends on the situation. It would be better to have smaller shoes, half-size shoes, or maybe the summer period will be too short. We'll have to calculate how much we can sell, how much we have in our stores. So we have to, sometimes it's better not even to put it out in the store and try a different approach next year. Because we have to be able then to put the autumn and winter shoes into the stores as well. So we don't have sandals and low-cut shoes. So the whole calendar has been pushed back by a month or so, and so we should be able to utilize much better that situation. Okay. We have a question in terms of LPP. Does the management board want to resign from a portion of its salary until the crisis is over? So the management team, it's about 210,000 zlotys, close to 200,000. This is a PR thing as opposed to a systemic thing. We're focusing on real measures that stabilize the company and will procure jobs. So we're saying we have to restructure, reorganize the business, and we're not going to extend some contracts. I don't want to get into the subject of what we as management board members are doing. We're not doing different things with respect to the employees than the ones we've done towards ourselves.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to thank you very much for your attendance in today's conference and wrap up, and I look forward to the opportunity to interact with you in the near future. Once again, thank you very much. Bye-bye. So we were not the only object of the things that happened yesterday, probably some sort of joke according to the authors of that, but we've made some changes which I think should curtail those type of incidents from happening in the future, certainly in today's conference as well as in the future. And so I hope this is going to be the case. And so now we can come back to the Q&A session, and we can start with the sequence of questions where the questions were not responded to yesterday. So before I begin, I'd like to remind you once again the statement that we made yesterday, because it's quite important in terms of the legal protection of the company. The sole purpose of this conference call is to present and discuss the impact of COVID-19 on the business of the company and selected preliminary financial and operational results of CCC Group for the first quarter of 2020 in accordance with the legal restrictions on communicating information about the company. Due to the profile of this conference call, which remains open for all interested participants, we are not in a position to discuss any other topics, in particular any topics related to the matters set forth in the agenda of the forthcoming shareholders meeting. If you have any, we have a current report on that subject. If you have any questions in that respect, we would ask you that you proceed in accordance with the procedure set forth in the relevant CCC materials publicly released in relation to the shareholders meeting. And I already mentioned, of course, this current report that we published. And so now we can come back to your questions, and then I would ask for those questions to be read out. And then we as a management board, we will make our attempts to respond to them. So the first question from yesterday, Isabella Saidek asked, having in mind the current debt being pushed back to June 2021, do you intend to pay the bonds down in normal basis, because there is the maturity? And if not, what is the plan for the redemption of the bonds? And so looking at the presentation that we sent to you yesterday, we do not plan to move the term of paying down the bonds. Our model shows on a cash basis, this looks quite okay, and we're able to basically meet our obligations there. The next question is posed by Michal from GBN. Can we go through the key items of note 4 of the financial statements? This page 47. This is liabilities falling due in the next 3 months. And this is the financial statements for 2019. So I'll try to walk through that first column. So the line items and what is there. The first item is credits up to 3 months. As I mentioned to you yesterday, we have an overdraft. The overdraft changes because it depends on expenditures and incoming funds. And so that's why it's shown here in the 3-month position, based on my knowledge. It's not until October of 2020 that the first overdrafts would be rolled over. So it doesn't really have a short-term period like the 3-month period here. The next liability is to suppliers. We have liabilities which the company drew down, having in mind services provided as well as products to be delivered. And we have this paid in cash, or we have a supply financing program. So basically, there's liabilities to be paid. So these are from e-commerce companies in terms of the customer's rights to get a refund on the products delivered to them for a period of 30 days. And then there's a cutoff. And then we have leasing liabilities. I don't think we need to comment on that. And so it's written down when they mature. And then we have basically a summary of those liabilities. So next question from Mikhailovsky. So on the 31 March, there's not information in your agreement with the banks about the covenant not being removed. Were you not able to renegotiate that? What we've reported on the 31st of March, this is a part of the stabilization package done quickly. It's where we negotiated the term sheet and basically wanted to stabilize the financing up until 30 June 2021. And so this is a record-breaking pace at which we did this with our banks. The next steps are still in front of us, and some of the elements in our proposed term sheet that we've given to the banks, there's also resolutions about changing the terms of the bonds that's been given to the bondholders. Then is the head of the supervisory board, hearable, and other persons. Yes? Can you hear me? Yes. I've been allowed to join. Okay, let's go on then. This is what's happening with investments. You had planned to enlarge the network, the brick and mortar network, quite extensively. I know this is not going to happen. When you restart, will you go to the brick and mortar enlargement, or will it be the case that e-commerce will become the wheel? Everything has changed. And so we're renegotiating terms, fit outs, terms of opening. Everything is being renegotiated. The contracts that were signed before the crisis have to be checked, verified very strongly. But you can't ask me if it's going to be 25,000 or 29,000, because it's all a matter of discussions. So we'll open something if we're going to have a 3-month, vacation period on rents. But today we can't really draw a feather out of a cap and say exactly what's going to happen. So the company is very much focused on drawing additional benefits. We won't be able to run a store based on the previous conditions that had been in place for those contracts. I think that's the sufficient response. We have plans to reduce stores and to move stores elsewhere based on the contracts. We don't want to state precisely on those plans because the talks are underway. We're all aware of the situation where we are, whether or not e-commerce can become the dominant channel in CCC. Well, it's probably premature to speak to that subject today under the Go22 strategy for 2022. We had said that 40% of our sales would be in e-commerce. So today, we know it's not going to be less. The question is, when we say that e-commerce is the dominant form of sales for us, we're thinking more about being an omni-channel as we create basically an ecosystem. And so it depends on how the customer preferences are going to evolve over time. We're not going to walk away from brick and mortar retail. We want to be omni-channel for our customers. I would add 10% of retail business in CCC was supposed to be done through e-commerce in 2022. We'll probably have that achieved in 2021 if we look at trends. The trends will start to present themselves and manifest in 2020. So by 2022, we would think that maybe half of the business would come through e-commerce. The evolution of trends will speed up over time. And so we want to be at the forefront. And we want to fully benefit from the trends as they manifest themselves. Within the framework of all of the talks we've been engaging about the stores, they're very intensive, these talks. We're going to try to have a clause that rents will depend on sales, and this will give us much more freedom, and it will depend about the intensity of the traffic and the individual locations where we're present. It's very difficult to focus on a single channel because the customers will buy in a variety of channels, and we have to be ready to serve customers where they want to be served. So I would ask you not to ask when we're going to open stores. Don't ask us whether or not Tour de France will take place this year with the public present or not. We don't know the responses to those type of questions. The only thing that we can assure you is that we're going to renegotiate everything. We're in the process of renegotiating. We're doing this first. We're the first to do a new rights offering. And we're working with the financing institutions, and we feel 100% responsibility for the company. And this is what we're doing. So the next question is from Piotr Lubczynski. Nominally in PLN, what's the fall and winter collection going to look like? And will you have any problems with financing? There's not going to be any problem to finance that because our partners are taking the down payments and the bulk of the payments for the production of the collection. And so they're taking that on themselves, and they're going to make sure that this will not be stopped, because it would be very difficult to rebuild the production capacities if we were to let all of the employees go in these factories where we've got very good relationships. We're going to maintain those relations and cultivate them, because we think that this will last maybe 2-3 months, and then we're going to be able to rebuild things. If stores don't open until the end of the year, then we're going to have the collection in our warehouses for an extra year. Those of you who are using your microphones, if you could turn off your microphones, that would be useful. I think it's our CEO who's actually making a lot of noise there. I would confirm that I've been the one who's making so much noise. So generally speaking, we don't know whether net stores will be open in the fall or not. If somebody would tell me when the stores are going to be open, then I'll know exactly how to operate. But we're looking at all of the scenarios. So stores could be open, stores might not be open. We have to have a view to all of those scenarios. We're going to be poised with the collection, and that's our major objective, is to be ready. So you can't, maintain stores and people and not have products. That's something that's unimaginable. The next question from Anbank. How many stores will be closed in 2020? So this is a question to a clairvoyant. So prior to the crisis, we tried to close more stores, but they wanted 4% of revenues. Well, we'll get maybe such good commercial conditions that there's no reason for us to do it. And so we're only going to close the stores that aren't profitable. I think that's the proper response. I wouldn't get into the numbers because I'm not able to give you specific figures. So we've indicated to you in this area that in German countries, we're going to have a very round number, specific number. That's true if we're talking about Western Germany. In the next period, we want to drop that by half, but in Central Eastern Europe, where our business is run, I don't expect that we'd have a large number of closures. I think everybody's going to want to keep our stores there. Next question from Piotr Bungusz. Please give us an update about the Western Europe, Austria, and Swiss segment, and what sort of plan for closure of stores. I think the response was given a moment ago. So we're going to reduce the number of stores by half. We're talking about 100 stores in all of these markets, which should be closed. And so the situation is conducive to that. In terms of the markets, we're doing analysis of each one of the possible scenarios. We still have to make the decisions. We'll communicate them by the time of the next main conference on the 24th of April. I would add that the average duration of a contract is 1.5 years. In Switzerland, we can close all of them. We're thinking about the economics. We're looking at the stores that are earning money after we've cleaned up the head office and got rid of all of the extraneous costs. So nearly 140 people have been let go. And so these stores most of these stores should generate a profit. Today, we don't know how profound the aid will be in various countries because of having downtime for employees. We're not really sure what's going to happen in terms of our trading conditions, what the rents will be. So all of these things are being negotiated. I can promise you that we won't wait to close stores that are unprofitable. So the next question from GPM. Is it still available to have reverse factoring? What does confirming mean with respect to 561 million liabilities in the current financial statement? I've already responded to the second. Confirming is our name for supplier financing. That's what it should be called, supplier financing. And so we've indicated in our reports of 31 March, those contracts and those limits have been upheld. And over the next few weeks, we'll have intensive work to iron out the details, how this will operate until 30 June 2020. I understand this is an expectation of the shareholders, and as well as our obligation to the company to make sure that all of the groups who are interested in the financial standing of the company would have comfort in terms of how they operate. Next question is from Haiton Bank. What was your EBIT margin in Q1 2020? What might the EBIT margin be in full 2020? Do you see e-commerce war?
We haven't given segments in our current report, so I can't really report on that subject. We're bound by the communication we've delivered in the prelims. Of course, you can anticipate that the profitability in a natural way of Eobuwie and the e-commerce is the highest because of the sales being cut off in March. In terms of the price war, there's more competition, and this could be reflected by the margins because all of those players that have this channel, not everybody has this channel, well, they've started to try to sell through the e-commerce channel. So it's a little bit more crowded. But it would be very difficult to say what the margin would be at the end of the year because I would be reading from tea leaves. Basically, we have to work more with liquidity and maneuvering through the situation. We'll have more information later in April. But some of the questions that appeared today, that costs are higher in Eobuwie and so on and so forth, or e-commerce. Well, those costs haven't grown with respect to the situation prior to COVID. Well, even in the e-commerce side of the business with respect to costs, we can say the situation is better. And the revenue, which is the main driver of the EBIT, or the operating profit, as we mentioned yesterday, well, this is something that changes a lot, it varies a lot. So we had weekends in the past where we were just barely above profit margin, and then we've had things grow by 100%. So it's very difficult to say on this basis to create an overall picture what's going to happen in 2020 because it would be unrealistic because of the variability there. So the next question from GPM: what was like for like in January and February in the first couple of weeks of March? We don't drill down to that level. We gave you a trading update on the 6th of March, let me remind you. So I would point out, on top of the main subject of today's discussion and the impact exerted by COVID-19, there are another set of factors. Some of them are systematic, the changes in the calendar. Well, January is a sell-off month. February is when we readjust ourselves, our mindset to spring, and then in March we sell the full spring collection. That's one thing. The second thing, this is a paradigm shift. The second thing, so in January, in February, we were selling winter collection. We didn't have much of a winter, and the traffic in galleries didn't start to drop in 13 March down to zero from them. It was a trend that started already in February. So if we look at the like-for-likes, we were delicately in the black in January, in minus in February, and then in March we started to go into bigger minus figures, negative figures, the closer we came to the 13th of March. If we were saying traffic falling by 10%, even if we had that 10% less traffic, we still had 0% like for like. So we had seen bigger conversion of sales. So a lot of positive things were happening with respect to the spring collection per ticket in terms of our sales. So with that level of traffic, so we had, negative traffic or traffic constriction, we were able to overcome that problem and get better like for like. That's more or less all the detail I can give on that subject. The next subject is from UBS. Are there any limitations on cash flow or moving cash from Eobuwie to CCC? And do you have FX risk hedges in place? So coming back to hedging, without getting into the details, we have a big position on cash that's hedged on the dollar.
at the level from prior to the crisis. The same is true of euro. We're not going to cite the specific figures, but that's a bulk of things. If we look at eobuwie is a separate company we work with in the form of a group. There are no formal limitations. I would like to cut off all possible speculations because some speculation was ventured. Do we have any type of pledges on our shares in eobuwie? Do we have any limitations in terms of disposal? There are no pledges. We have full freedom. We don't have cash pooling for the whole group. We would like for eobuwie to have its own financing. That's the way we've done things. It has its own cash fund. We have another question from GBM. Do we have similar crisis shield programs like in Poland in other countries? Let me find this slide. I don't want to bore you with the various elements, but there is a government support program in a variety of countries. This is on slide 23. And they're rather similar to what we have in Poland, those support programs. Perhaps the scope and the depth vary, but the overall direction is similar, like Switzerland, Austria, and Germany, those aid programs have been up and running, where Slovakia implemented a program overnight. In countries like Poland, there's a big aid program that touches upon a large number of issues in terms of this anti-crisis shield. But support programs are present in all of these countries, and we're utilizing these programs in the various countries, Switzerland and Czech Republic, Poland, where we've initiated those or commenced those initiatives. So we have changes in the FTEs that were introduced as of the 31st into the March into the 1st of April. So a few hours later, we submitted an application for aid because we prepared ourselves previously, and that's true of nearly every program. We're very pleased with the organizational efficiency in terms of our project approach, how to deal with this crisis. We have teams, task forces working on this both in Poland as well as in other countries, and you're able to get a full picture of what's happening elsewhere. Most of the business is in Poland, so what's critical to us are the solutions in Poland. And we can say that we're pleased with the pace and how these various items of aid have been addressed by the government. It's our hope that we'll have Shield 2.0 or maybe 3.0. Well, because those programs address our needs at present, but we're pleased with what we've seen thus far, because this is a situation that's been in place for roughly 3 weeks. The next question is also from Michał. Does the company not to, in terms of canceling contracts in Poland, can you do this, which based on what you had planned to do prior to the crisis, where you wanted to squash some of these contracts that weren't profitable? We've already talked about that. The head of the supervisor already talked about that. And we have force majeure clause. If stores are closed for longer than a certain number of days, then this is a force majeure event, and then you can close or you can walk away. Well, let's not prefigure that subject. We're talking with all of the landlords, and we'll show you the results subsequently. The next question, what's the planned cash flow under the development of sales and the cutting of costs? What do you see the future cash flow? We've given you the assumptions and the targets in our presentation. I don't think you have to put it into your own models and respond to those questions. What we're counting on, as we've pointed to, that as we cut costs and utilizing the opportunity to push back expenditures and doing the rights offering and taking advantage of the aid program, we'll have a very good cash position at the end of the quarter. So giving into consideration the pace at which we're operating and the size of the organization, I can say with full responsibility that all of the institutions, including the financial institutions, are fully involved and will be in a better position at the end of the quarter than the bulk of the representatives of the industry or the overall industry. That's sort of my best guess. Then we have a question from mBank. Zalando called off its forecasts and said that consumers have started to change their behavior. And as they're staying at home and they have less inclination to make e-commerce purchases. Have we seen any slowdown in Eobuwie in recent days? Perhaps your assumptions are too aggressive in terms of the uptick in sales through e-commerce. So responding to the assumptions, in our opinion, they're not overly aggressive. Of course, this is an estimate based on our expert knowledge, but it's based on analysis of what's happened in elsewhere during other crises, and this is our best knowledge. Let's look at this logically. If e-commerce is 20% of sales in footwear, that would mean that all retail stores are closed, and so let's say that would mean that they're only buying 15%. So that would be a decline of 85% in terms of decline. We can't explain what Zalando has announced. We believe that we've got 460 stores closed and 10,000 stores with shoes are closed in Poland. So there has to be more sales through the internet. That would suggest that nobody is actually buying shoes at all. We think the behavior of clients might change afterwards, that e-commerce will speed up much more quickly after the crisis, but we can't assume that there's going to be maybe Zalando's only in this channel, doesn't combine other channels, but we're looking at other segments. Let me add, two trends are clear to us into Zalando from the point of view of the customer. Customers will buy more in e-commerce. So there's going to be a faster adaptation or switch to e-commerce, and clients will spend their money for consumption more carefully. And so we're in both of those trends, and we've got a pretty good situation or position. So we'll have a faster switch over to this base, and we'll see the prudence of customers. And it's a matter of having a good ratio of price to value. This is what clients of Zalando are also our clients. So those fears and concerns could be quite similar. And so we'll align our marketing policy to that, and we're changing things there. And so we're going to have to be very close to we're going to have to have our ear to the ground to listen to how customers are changing their behaviors. So it's a little hard to do a prediction for the full year, but we'll look at customers after the stores are reopened, everything like that. There's going to be more open to buying, to be safer. And so the inclination to be inclination to buy through e-commerce is going to be bigger than what it is today. We see basically some caution. Thank you very much for the additional comments. Next question from JPM. What do you plan to do with the inventory for spring collection? Are you going to sell it later in the summer, or are you going to put it in the warehouse? We responded yesterday. So nearly 1 billion of inventory can be used. So either through sales or perhaps we have a big portion that is multi-season, so it can actually be sold in the fall or SS21. We've already talked quite a bit about this subject. We feel very comfortable with this collection. We have our Go22 strategy, and what's going on in terms of working capital. The chairman has already said a few times, we're masters of dealing with a variety of situations. So next question. Like LPPB, do you intend to resign from a portion of your salaries until the crisis ends? This is a question from a journalist. We're not going to make any type of PR statements. This is around 200,000 watts a month. So this is a third layer topic, more of a PR subject as opposed to a real systemic. We want to make sure we retain jobs, but we're not asking the staff to take any bigger brunt of the burden than we take ourselves. We're not communicating that with you because these are internal communications. We're talking with our team and the consolidation of our team. We've reduced our salaries a few times as the manager. In March, we did that as well. And so all of our management did that voluntarily. We think that the impact will be around 3 million watts in this period of limitation. So all bonuses for 2019 have been pushed back around 4 million until the situation is stabilized. But journalists aren't here with us today. This is not a statement being made to the public. We treat this very seriously. And this is how we operate. As an aside, I would add, well, the supervisory board chairman, we didn't talk to you. This is not PR, but if I can allow myself to make this statement, and I hope the supervisory board won't blemish me for that. So they decided not to take any benefits or salaries from the company because we're very involved in the life of the company, but there's no payments being made. Of course, there are actions that we're taking, but without trying to create any publicity around it or do any type of PR. Well, the market and the history will look at us in terms of what position CCC has in 3 months or a year, whether or not we're going to be able to achieve our strategy successfully, and that's about it. You can be certain that we are treating this very seriously and very responsibly. And I hope this is one of the messages that you'll take away with you as you leave the conference. We have one more question from yesterday, and this is from the English language chat about one of the slides. What are the targets that you, or assumptions you make in terms of the revenue in 2020, where you had a minus 100% to 10% at the end of the year? Maybe I can actually put up that slide, and so it'll be more clear what we have in mind. Carl. This is the path. The base, we have minus 70% in May against the budget. That's sales versus budget. then minus 30, minus 20 in June and July. And then for the rest of the year, it's minus 10%. That's the assumption for the rest of the year. It seems to us that we gave you some pretty important information yesterday that even in the pessimistic scenario, even if we would only have 50% of the sales we had planned, having in mind that we've agreed with the banks that we've got the recapitalization of the company, and so also the money from BGK Bank, 600 million, and then savings initiatives. And so we'll be maybe a little more beaten up and more lean. We're going to be able to easily make it through the end of 2020, and we wouldn't need any additional recapitalization, or we wouldn't have to ask for any additional sources of funding. So under this program, at the end of this month or at the beginning of May, we should be well poised for even an Armageddon scenario, a very pessimistic scenario in retail trade that nobody's buying in retail stores. I think it would be worth mentioning here that agreeing on rents stated as a percentage of sales in a given store, because rents are very big, important. And so the staff with smaller sales, well, we won't have the same number of staff. And so we know that unemployment is going to be quite big here. And so we have to prepare ourselves for the point in time when traffic is in place. So it's as if we were not to open anything at all if we're going to have traffic down 70%. So this is something that's quite important. So I think we should wait until the society gets healthy again. We're ready to sell shoes immediately. We've got them in the stores, in our warehouses, and this is quite important for us. And here, I wouldn't be a clairvoyant whether or not this is going to be at the beginning or the end of May or June or August. We're able to go into a period of hibernation until we have the medicine. And basically, we're moving in the direction to make sure that we're in that full state of hibernation. And so then we'll be basically as lean as possible for the time of the epidemic. And then we'll wake up from this hibernation once there is a medicine for it and the world starts to renew itself. That's exactly the case with most of the landlords. We want to agree with them that we would only have a rent that would be a percentage of our sales. It's not an easy talk, and we're spending a lot of time on that subject, but it's going well. And we think that in the crisis here, that's going to be the business model that we'll have with the landlords, which would enable us to go back into the normal business environment sometime next year. Those are all of the questions from yesterday that we weren't able to respond to. But during today's session, we have a few additional questions. So perhaps I'll go ahead and read those questions now. So from Heidenbank, there was a statement made yesterday that under restructuring, you think that you might exit certain markets. What markets you thinking? What markets you think about? Austria, Switzerland, or others? What will this decision depend upon? What does that person think? What markets we should exit? We've been talking about this for a year, and we're saying for a couple of days that we're going to cut out everything that's not profitable. So these questions are recurring. Ladies and gentlemen, I've already said there are no jokes here. We have an axe, and you can be certain everything that's weak, sick, and ailing, we're going to cut it off. That's a clear declaration. I wouldn't dwell on this. If it's going to be a store in bigger Potsdam or a smaller Potsdam, I think these questions aren't really well placed here. A question that's been posed previously. You said we'll finance in CCC. We'll have basically revenues covering costs. Does that mean that you're going to be pulling away money from eobuwie. We do not plan to take actions. The actions we're taken are with respect to CC in terms of additional financing and these initiatives. But with respect to e-commerce, we have several markets and things balance here. CCC is money's come into CCC accounts. We have a few questions that don't rehearse again from JPM. Perhaps I'll read them off. What's the cash conversion cycle in eobuwie? What capex is required there on average per year? And without including new logistics centers, how much money they're sending? Is the warehouse in Zielona Góra already up and running? Or are there any other expenditures to be paid? Starting with the beginning, in terms of the conversion cycle, this is B2C, so sales. There's nothing to talk about. If we talk about liabilities, I think it's around 90, 100 days. Inventory, that's 140, but it varies for your modeling needs. In eobuwie, it's 110 days. In Modivo, it's around 200 days. The average is 140 days. So the inventory is rotating pretty quickly. We've shown you the CapEx needs in the quarterly presentations prior to COVID. Here we're saying that depending on the situation, we can follow a variety of scenarios. It's not a big amount of CapEx, even if we have to invest in that K3 warehouse. So probably around 30 million. Other things are possible. We can actually shift them, defer them, reduce them, cut them. It seems that everybody's worried about eobuwie. Eobuwie will be the beneficiary of the problem that's happened with the market. The company's well poised. It's got products for much better prices because a lot of retail stores weren't buying products. And so we've got a very good position on the market there, and it should follow its sales plans and its financial plans. Let's not try to explain what the figures, if it's 90 days or 100 days or whatever. We should ask how we see the situation. Let's not get into the individual figures because that information is in the financial statements. Okay, that information is not in the financial statements. Well, I think the analysts, I think the questions are necessary for them to be able to fill out their models and to give good advice to investors. eobuwie, I agree, is a machine that's well running, it's accelerating, it's going to benefit from this situation. So both of these companies feel very good in the situation, as the chairman mentioned, because we're well ready to, if we look at history, CCC started on the Russian crisis, where most of the factories in Poland were down. And so eobuwie was buying large amounts of shoes in rebates from e-commerce at good margins. And so both of the companies started during a crisis situation. So I don't see any reason for us not to utilize the current situation, this crisis, and basically move forward very strongly and swiftly. The next question from Haitong Bank: how much time, according to you, will it take you to renegotiate all or most of the rents? Will it take you 2 or 3 months or longer? Or do you believe that 100% of your rents will be dependent upon the sales levels? I think we could say we have as much time as the stores are closed, because we're not paying rents while the stores are closed. So we should agree with everybody for the first trading year after the stores open. If we don't get those conditions, then we're able just not to open them, and we won't lose anything in the first weeks, because we believe, like in China, the market will come back slowly. So we're well prepared for very strong negotiations. Here, there are no jokes. They need us and we need them. We have the stores. Let's remember, we're in a chain between the banks that have financed us, between the suppliers who still have to produce shoes for us, and the owners of shopping galleries, and the customers who want to buy these shoes. Our product is the least expensive product on the market, and in the crisis, this is a policy that has to prove itself. We all have to be patient. It's not just CCC's problem. This is a problem of everybody around CCC. It's the problem of the overall market and the whole society at this point in time. So we can't, bear the cross on our shoulders for what's happened. We're not going to explain what Zalando says and other people say. We have a very clear plan, and this is what we want to pursue, and we want to stick to this. Let's try to get rid of all of the other doubts. And basically, we'll share this cross with all of our partners. It's not possible for the gallery to expect a full rent with traffic down by 50%. Marcin, if you could turn off your microphone for a second. The relations we have with our suppliers for many years. I've been in this business for 30 years. I've always been in the shoe business, so I know more or less, and I feel this business. I know how to maneuver myself on this market. We have a few more cards in the deck than other people. Here I'll open, here I'll not open. I'll pay this person, not pay that person. Of course, we have things that are renegotiated, extended. We'll see what sort of funds we'll use. And so conditions have changed. So nothing will be the same. We should forget that you can take a vacation this year and you're going to go around for a walk in a week. I mean, everything is changing. And so we have that full awareness, and we've basically changed everything in our models. And we're the only entity doing a rights offering. And the rights offering has to be successful. And I'm confident that it will be successful. And how that will change our relation of cash to debt will be in a totally different fairy tale. Well, because that all of that debt is in investments. This is not cash that's been eaten up. We're very well ready. We have inventory worth 2.5 billion, and then we have another 1.5 billion coming in the fall. And so basically everybody's going to have to wait for this market to get moving. So the suppliers and the creditors and the others, this is not the weakness of our company that we've exaggerated somewhere. As you know, in March, in April, we had 1.2 billion in revenue from our stores. We were able to straighten the roads because if you look at our inventory per square meter, we've reduced inventory. That was the cash that we've released from old inventory. So we have much better collections, and we've got it in the stores, merchandised on time. And so we didn't have any of the problems we had from last year. And we were supposed to do a lot of nice trading in March and April. And so now we have to take the hibernation path, move into winters, freeze everything, not pay rents, reduce salaries, or take government debt, government aid, excuse me, and of course do rights offerings, and then wait. Other companies are going to have a lot of problems. This is not just our problem. This is a problem of the entire retail industry, and a problem of unemployment and many other things. And so we've got a good price to value ratio with shoes. That's more or less all I can say with respect to these difficult questions. So, and as opposed to asking how many stores you're going to close in March or April, perhaps I'm not going to close stores. because the conditions would be so good that I won't have to close anything, having in mind other things we've not amortized. Thank you. Thank you. With respect to the competition, we forgot to say that we had stores operating in the first 10 days of March. Even though we were minus territory, we did much better than other stores and shopping centers selling similar products. So we believe that we've done our homework, and now we just have to be able to show the results. Any more questions? We have a couple. What's the status of support from government institutions? When and to what degree and what form of support will you be able to receive? We responded, I think yesterday, we went through the tables one by one. This is in the backup slide in the presentation. As I mentioned, we've asked for support for wages. We're preparing to look at the liquidity guarantee fund, and we're looking at everything else that's available, and we're following this steadfastly. So then we put everything together based on what is there. The company intends to utilize everything that's there, and I think that's the best and the shortest response. Next question. Your scenario of the rights offering being successful and collecting 400 million. What happens in scenario B if you don't get money from financial investors? Do you think that if only, is it the case that only Mr. Muick would provide money, how much time would you have if you don't have any proceeds from the rights offering? We feel good with the rights offering and also without the rights offering. We have a lot of institutions interested in participating in this return to normal business. And even if we only use that part of the rights offering declared by the key shareholder, we'll have other avenues. We have an excess of willing parties. The rights offering is the quickest. That's more or less all of the questions that have been posed. And I've got confirmation that we don't have any questions from the English language forum. So if the chairman doesn't have anything to add, I would add one thing to our dear investors. You consistently ask what we think about LPP and Zalando. I feel this. What about a question? How does the management board, what's your health? Do you really want to work? I think that these kind of questions are missing. Will you be successful here? Will you be successful here? We're so determined, like never, and we'll deliver what we're seeing. We've got plans B, C, D, E, and we have suppliers not getting their money for a year, but we're all on the same boat. Everybody around us is suffering. And so we have to have a state of hibernation. I don't see any other way forward. Thankfully, the entire team is together, and you can see that we're working strongly. We're the first to do everything on the market in terms of talks with the banks, rights offering, our declarations and applications for aid. We feel pretty good with all this. Please assess us with this respect, and not only based on what Zalando has said. So the team is compact. and working together. And we should be able to emerge from this crisis even more strengthened to an even greater degree. So I thank you very much for these words on behalf of the entire team. I feel that there's maybe a bit of faith missing from these questions. So with respect to the overall situation. Carol, what do you think? What do you think, management board? Be frank. I think what you said really reflects the full truth. We really are working together. We've got, the crisis is helping us in a lot of things, in a lot of difficult situations where we would have to discuss differently. Things would be impeded or hindered. We have to survive this year 2020. This is not a year of normal business or good results. We have to defend ourselves, and we have to protect ourselves in a bunker, but then we'll be able to come back into the normal business. And we want to be the least perturbed as possible and to return. And so it's a realistic plan to get recapitalization of 600 million, and that would bring us into 2021. And then we'll be able to follow our business with normal conditions, and competition will be weakened, and clients will be looking for the product we have. And we won't have to build anything, no digital things. We're ready and poised. We're battle ready. So we feel very good in this crisis. And I think that's been said many times, and we'll be able to deliver what we are supposed to deliver. I think the crisis will enable us to take up another 10% market share. Who sells more has a bigger market share. That's quite important. And so this crisis will enable us to bump up our market share. I'm more than certain of that, because we're basically a company poised and created for dealing with the difficult times. Every crisis mobilizes people to make changes. We've announced them in the strategy. We're very consistent, and we are systematic and steadfast, and we are battle ready as a team, and we're proud of what we've been able to achieve in such a short period of time. The road ahead is difficult. We don't want to be overly optimistic because there's a lot of challenges before us, but we're more than convinced that the success of CCC is at the end of the road. And this is closer to us. So we've been able to achieve quite a bit, even though the fact that we're working remotely and the normal rules have been changed overnight. That's exactly the case. So I think that's the right scenario to think about, Susie. I've been in this company for 20 years. We've gone through quotas, changes, production profiles. I think we've emerged from every other crisis stronger. I think we'll emerge from this one even stronger. Amen. So we'd like to thank you for your attention and attendance. We're ready and at your disposal in any formula. And so if you have other questions in your heads, come back to us, and we'll hear each other on the 24th of April. We've pushed up the time for reporting, so you have comfort about the company. And over the next 3 weeks, we'll be able to complete very specific things that have been detailed in this presentation, ones that we've alluded to. So the company is sped up, and it's determined and steadfast, and it's moving along the path that is presented. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.